Imagine this. What if a baby spoke the moment he was born? What if, by God's permission, he gave sight to the blind, healed the incurably sick, brought the dead back to life, and when his enemies came to kill him, they couldn't even lay a hand on him? Would you recognize him as a prophet sent by God? Or would the world eventually begin calling him God? This isn't just the story of Jesus. It's the story of one of the greatest misunderstandings in human history. A story where truth slowly became mixed with falsehood, where beliefs changed, narratives evolved. And over time, a prophet sent to call people back to God was worshipped by millions. But how did that happen? To answer that question, we have to travel back nearly 2,000 years, to a time when the children of Israel were living through one of the darkest chapters in their history. There was once a time when God had blessed them beyond measure. They had received prophets, divine scriptures, and clear guidance. But as generations passed, everything began to change. The very people entrusted with protecting God's message started altering it for their own benefit. Ordinary people were kept away from the truth. Religion became a source of wealth and influence. At the same time, the Roman Empire tightened its grip over the land. Heavy taxes, political oppression, and constant fear had broken the spirit of the people. Yet one promise continued to give them hope. Their scriptures spoke of a coming Messiah, someone who would rescue them from their suffering. Every eye waited for his arrival, but the Messiah they imagined was not the Messiah God intended to send. They expected a mighty king, a fearless military commander, a man who would overthrow empires. Instead, God chose a humble, righteous woman, Mary. One day, while she was alone in worship, the angel Gabriel appeared before her in the form of a man. Startled and afraid, Mary stepped back, but Gabriel gently reassured her. "Do not be afraid. I have come with a message from your Lord. You will be blessed with a pure son." Mary was overwhelmed. "How can this be? No man has ever touched me." The answer was simple. When God wills something, he only says, "Be." And it is. Soon afterward, a miracle unlike anything in human history took place. Jesus was born, alone, far from the eyes of the world. In the pain of childbirth, Mary cried out in despair, "I wish I had died before this." But God did not abandon her. A spring of fresh water appeared beneath her feet. A date palm provided fresh fruit, and God comforted her in her darkest moment. This has always been God's way. When the entire world leaves you, God never does. Then came the moment she feared the most. Mary returned to her people carrying her newborn son. The accusations began immediately. People mocked her, questioned her honor. Voices rose from every direction, but Mary remained silent. Instead of defending herself, she simply pointed toward the baby in her arms. The crowd laughed. How can a newborn child possibly speak? Then, everything changed. By God's permission, the infant Jesus spoke. "I am a servant of God." In a single moment, Mary's innocence was proven, and Jesus' identity was made clear. But this was only the beginning. In the years ahead, God would bless Jesus with extraordinary miracles. Miracles so astonishing that even his enemies would struggle to deny them. Yet ironically, the greater the miracles became, the greater the conspiracy against him grew. From childhood, Jesus was unlike anyone around him. He lived with remarkable humility. He sought neither wealth, nor power, nor status. His life revolved around one purpose alone: to guide people back to their Creator. When God appointed him as a prophet, the spiritual condition of the children of Israel had grown even worse. Places of worship still stood. Religious ceremonies continued. But hearts had become distant from God. Truth had been exchanged for personal gain. Religious leaders twisted scripture to protect their own influence. Jesus confronted this corruption with one clear message: worship God alone. For ordinary people, his words brought hope. But for those whose authority depended on controlling religion, he represented a serious threat. Then the miracles began. By God's permission, the blind received their sight. Those suffering from incurable diseases were healed. The sick recovered. Even the dead were brought back to life. Yet after every miracle, Jesus reminded the people of one important truth. This power does not belong to me. Everything happens only by the permission of God. That statement matters, because Jesus never pointed people toward himself. He always pointed them toward God. One day, some people demanded another sign. If you truly are God's messenger, ask him to send us a table from heaven. Jesus prayed. According to the Qur'an, God answered that prayer. A heavenly feast descended as a clear sign. Many believed, but others still refused. History teaches us an important lesson. Evidence alone does not change a closed heart. Sometimes people reject the truth, not because they cannot see it, but because accepting it would force them to change their lives. As Jesus' message spread, so did the opposition against him. His closest disciples stood by his side with unwavering loyalty. But the religious leaders grew more desperate with every passing day. They knew that if people continued listening to Jesus, their influence, their wealth, and their authority would slowly disappear. Meanwhile, the Roman authorities had also begun watching him closely. In those days, any man capable of gathering large crowds was viewed as a potential political threat. Even though Jesus never called for rebellion, rumors spread quickly. His enemies accused him of trying to become a king behind closed doors. A dangerous conspiracy was taking shape. False accusations, secret meetings, political manipulation. Everything was carefully planned. Then came the night that would change history forever. Jesus gathered with his closest disciples. The atmosphere was calm, but his words would leave everyone speechless. He looked at them and said, "One of you will betray me." Silence filled the room. Every disciple looked around in disbelief. Each one wondered, who could it possibly be? Only hours later, armed men arrived under the cover of darkness. Their mission was simple: capture Jesus, silence his message, and put an end to his influence. But while human beings were making their plans, God's plan was already unfolding. Just as the soldiers moved in, God raised Jesus to himself. His enemies reached the place they thought they would find him, but the man they captured was not Jesus. They believed they had succeeded. They believed their mission was complete, but the truth was entirely different. God had protected his prophet, and that single event became one of the greatest turning points in religious history. From that moment forward, one question would divide millions of people. If Jesus was never on the cross, then who was? Different answers began spreading. Different stories emerged, and slowly, different beliefs were born. Jesus' followers were left shocked and confused. The teacher they had loved, the prophet who had guided them, was no longer among them. Some believed God had raised him alive. Others believed he had died. Some waited for his return. As time passed, certainty slowly gave way to speculation. History has seen this pattern many times. When a great leader disappears, people often begin interpreting his message in different ways. The same thing happened after Jesus. His earliest followers continued teaching exactly what they had learned from him: that God is one, that Jesus was his servant and prophet, and that every miracle happened only by God's permission. But outside that small group, new ideas slowly began to spread. Then one man entered the story, a man whose influence would change the course of Christian history forever. His name was Saul of Tarsus. Ironically, he had never been one of Jesus' disciples. He had never traveled with Jesus. He had never personally heard Jesus preach. In fact, historical records describe Saul as someone who actively persecuted the early followers of Jesus. Many believers were imprisoned. Others were forced to flee. Then everything changed. Saul claimed he experienced a powerful vision. After that experience, he embraced a new mission. The world would come to know him as Paul. From that point on, his teaching spread rapidly throughout the Roman Empire. But something was different. Paul focused less on what Jesus taught, and more on who Jesus was. His message gradually introduced ideas that became central to later Christian theology. Meanwhile, the disciples who had actually lived beside Jesus continued preserving the teachings they had received directly from him. For years, these different understandings existed side by side. Neither side could have imagined that this disagreement would shape the beliefs of billions of people for centuries to come. And this was only the beginning. Because the biggest debate about Jesus' identity would not be settled by his disciples. It would unfold centuries later, inside the halls of emperors, where politics, power, and religion would collide in a way that changed history forever.